the lesson on plotting the graph of a function within an arbitrary viewing window. Let's start with h of x equals 0.002x squared plus 0.005x minus 0.029. You need to first notice that this is a quadratic function so that you can get an idea of what the graph should look like. Because it's a quadratic function, it's going to look like a parabola. It's going to open up because the coefficient of x squared is positive. So let's type it into our grapher. So to access the graphing buttons, you notice that all the graphing keys are up here in white on the very top row of your graphing calculator. The y equals button, we're going to press that, and that's going to be where we type in the function. So let's just start typing. Decimal point 0.002 x squared. So the x button is directly to the right of the green button. It has x, t, theta, and n on it. So when we type it, it's going to be x. Then we're going to raise it to the second power. So you can either use the exponent button or you can use the shortcut button, which is x squared. That's the one I'm going to use. And then I'm going to keep typing plus decimal point 0.005x. So we're going to type the x button again. Then subtract. Make sure that you use the subtract button, which is located here, and not the negative button for integers. Subtract decimal point 0.029. All right, I'm going to go to Zoom. To check my Zoom window, I want to go to a standard viewing window, which is a -10 to +10x and a -10 to +10y. So in order to pick that Z standard, I can either scroll down and press enter to pick number 6, or I can simply type in 6. So I'm going to type 6, and it'll take me to that standard viewing window. So the graph didn't really show up on our screen except for a wee little bit right here. So what do we do when the graph doesn't show up on our screen? Well, we need to actually let's look at the table. I'm going to pull the table up. So I press second and then graph. Then in blue, that's how I've accessed these blue functions, is the blue button or the second button. So that's where the table is. So I'm going to press that table button. Notice that the y coordinates are negative when x is 0, 1, and 2, but then they change positive somewhere at 3. Well, if I scroll up in my table, they're negative long time, but then they start being positive at -6. So it looks like from the function, I'm going to go back to the graph. It looks like maybe the function is spread out like this. So what I need to do is I need to change my window so that I can see those actual coordinates. So I'm going to type window, which is at the top row, the second button. And I want to change and this is something that you just kind of have to play around with, looking at the table, helping you to decide what kind of graph it's going to be, knowing that it's a function. I need to change my x min and x max to be much larger. So I'm going to change it to say, I don't know, -100. So it's at -10, so I'm going to type in -100. So 100. Then I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to go down to, it'll take you automatically down to x max. I could also just press the down button to get to that. So I'm going to change the x maximum. In other words, on the graph, the maximum x coordinate, I don't want it to be 10 anymore. I want it to be 100. So I'm going to type in 100. And then I'm going to go to graph. So this time, I don't see the little ticks, but I definitely see my function. So that's how you graph a function that doesn't appear. Look at the table first, and then play around in the window. The second function that we're going to graph is f of x equals the square root of x plus the square root of 1 minus x. So let's go back to the y equals button. We want to clear out the function that we just typed in, so just press clear. And let's start typing in the function. So the square root button is the second function of x squared. So see the x squared button in this first column in blue, there's the square root function. So I'm going to press second and then the x squared button to get to square root, and then I need to type in an x. Now you have to tell the calculator when you want it to stop taking the square root. So remember that the function is just the square root of x. So I need to scroll to the right to get out from underneath the radical. And now I'm going to add or put plus. And I have the second square root, which is square root of 1 minus x. So I press second and then the x squared button again and type in 1 minus x. Again, we need to scroll to the right to get out from underneath that radical. And because I changed my window on the last graph, I'm going to go back to zoom and change it back to a standard viewing window. So I'm going to scroll down to number 6 and press enter to choose it, or I could have simply picked number 6. And now here's my standard viewing window, and goodness, it's just a little bitty graph. We can't hardly even see it. So we want to be able to see that graph. So what should we do? Let's just zoom in. One of our zoom buttons is zoom in. Another one is zoom out. If it's too large for the screen, we could zoom out. But because ours is teeny tiny, we actually want to zoom in. So let's go down to number 2, press enter. At this point, there's a cursor. You can barely see it blinking right here in the center or at the origin of the graph. You know that the cursor, where the cursor is, the calculator will tell you it. Right now it's at 0, 0. So I want to move my cursor up and over just a little bit, trying to get it centered a little bit in that graph, and then I'm going to press enter to say that's where I want the graph to zoom in. So I'm going to press enter. And so you can see that the screen changed, and the X is where my cursor, where I had just placed my cursor. So I see a little bit better of a picture, but I still don't quite see it well enough. So let me zoom in one more time. So again, I'm going to go to zoom, and I'm going to go to in. So zoom in, which is number 2, press enter. And at this point, I'm going to change where I want to zoom in. I'm going to scroll up a little bit, move that cursor up, and maybe I want to scroll to the right, maybe up a little bit more. And then once I have the cursor where I want it, I'm going to press enter. And now's where it zoomed in. It's a much better semicircular, maybe half of an ellipse picture. I get a better picture of it for sure. That concludes our lesson on plotting the graph of a function within an arbitrary viewing window.